There's research that shows that juries are biased against undocumented immigrants. He wasn't undocumented, but that really shouldn't matter because even undocumented immigrants are entitled to the same due process as everyone in a criminal case. But I think, what it comes down to is this case is a really extreme example, but I think that it's something that happens more often than we want to think about. And I think there are other immigrants in Alabama who may be facing a really hard road when they get arrested and they get charged and they're in court.
Alrighty, welcome in. It's another fantastic episode of your favorite political podcast. It's Alabama Politics This Week with Josh Moon and
David Person.
How are you, David?
Great, man. Doing great. How about you?
Oh, not bad, not bad. We've successfully recovered. Look, Obama's got on his little French hat. So we took Obama with us. Came back.
Very cool.
Nice little visit to London and Paris last week, and was really had a blast with the family over there. Went for my wife's birthday. Had a real fun time and doing that. Before we get into a lot of stuff here, though, let me tell you about our friends at Wind Creek Entertainment who sponsor this. It's Alabama Politics This Week, brought to you by Wind Creek Entertainment. After all, and they run 3 fantastic resort locations in this state. We wish you would go and check out in Wetumpka and Atmore and Montgomery. And they are some of the best places, some of the best hotels, some of the best spas, some of the best restaurants, some of the best gaming that you're going to find. Well, in the state of Alabama, certainly they're one of Alabama's largest hospitality employers, and they do a lot of stuff for this state, and we really do appreciate them and what they've done for the state and for us specifically, in just keeping this thing up and running and doing what we can do here. Go and check them out. I'm telling you, man. I don't know how many of you are still going to Auburn football games. God bless you if you are. Oh, we may need to enter us all into some sort of a rehab program. But if you are, I'm telling you, staying at one of those hotels in Wetumpka or Montgomery or going to one of the facilities and playing the games and having a good time, that's going to be a great weekend. If you're still going to the beach, I know they got some activities, some things that are drawing folks in down around the beach. Or you know what? Last Halloween we went down to OWA, another facility operated by the Porch Creeks. It's a water park, indoor water park, so it's open all year round, and also an amusement park with roller coasters and rides and things. They have a lot of fun stuff happening around Halloween. I know we entered our little girl into the costume contest down there, and I mean we were amazed by some of the costumes and some of the effort that was put into these things for these kids. And so look, it's a great time. I'm just saying, go to one of the places. Look them up online at Wind Creek Entertainment. You will not be disappointed in what you find at their establishments. I can guarantee you that. All right.
Yeah, I agree.
So
before, you're going to talk about your trip though, right? You got to talk. I mean, you were an American in Paris and in Europe. How are people responding to you? What are they talking about? You got to share that. Share all that.
No, listen, we had great. The London I like London a lot. London to me is a lot like New York City. There's a lot of similarities to me in how you operate, where you go, what you're doing. But we did basic tourist things, man. I mean, we were going around to Big Ben and Windsor and the whole deal. So we did a lot of the tourist stuff, and we were straight up tourists. I mean, we might as well have just had cameras strapped around our necks, and roaming around taking photos of things. But no shame at all. We said it when we were going. We knew we were going to look like tourists. We knew we were going to do touristy things, and we wanted to see these things though. And so we did a lot of that. We met a lot of people around and talked to them. And I've told people, I feel like there's a lot that's right with America. That we get right here that's different from over there. And then there's also some things that I feel like they do a lot better than us. And I'll say this, one of the most striking things to me was and not just me. My wife saw it. Her sister and her husband went with us as well, and their little girl. And so we so it was 6 of us all together, and pretty much everybody except the kids remarked on the attitudes of the service people. The folks at the airport, the folks checking you in at places, the folks who you deal with in at restaurants, the servers at restaurants, the folks who that work at the coffee shops. There was a pleasantness about them. A sense of not that they were being forced to work for shit wages, you know what I mean? And we all listen. I don't put this on American workers. Okay. They didn't all decide to become jackasses overnight. They didn't, and listen, come on, man, we can all, let's be real. Let's be real. If you've been out to eat, to deal with people at any sort of a business, and you've dealt with folks who are servers or working behind the counter or in a drive-through or at a big box store as working at as a cash. Come on, we can be honest and say there's some problems, right? There's some attitudinal problems, as my man Damon Wayans would say in Major Payne. There's some attitudinal problems going on here. And I get it. In a lot of cases, these folks have done pretty much everything right. They've gone to school. They've made decent grades. They've gotten into college. They've gotten a college degree of some sort. There was no job waiting on them, and so they've had to go into a service industry job that they never wanted to be in, and that job is paying them $2 an hour, and they're not making anything out of this deal, and certainly not enough to pay their rent, their utilities, their car payment, and all the other bills that are coming on. They're barely keeping their head above water, if it's above water, and they're angry about life and what the hand that life has dealt them at this point. And, and that you can give all the bootstrap talks you want to. We're not getting it done for these people. Okay. Our government and our system and the way we operate is not getting it done for these folks. And at some point, when enough people are feeling that way, it's no longer a problem with laziness and individual issues of people. It's a problem with the system that they're living in, and that system is failing them.
Yeah. Well, I can't dispute your experience with service people, because what you've experienced is what you've experienced, what you've seen is what you've seen. I will say my experience has not really been the same. And I'm thinking not only about here in North Alabama, where the places that I go on a regular basis, people are at least cordial. I don't know that I've really ever encountered anybody who was just outright nasty or belligerent.
And I'm not saying necessarily nasty,
or brooding,
indifferent.
Indifferent. I don't know. That
uncaring.
I've encountered that.
Not really concerned with whether or not you have a good experience. That sort of thing.
I don't know if I've encountered. I can't really say that I've encountered that. Maybe I have, and maybe I just brushed it off, or I was distracted while you were gallivanting on the continent, across an ocean away. You and the family. I was working first in Texas. I was working in Texas, and I didn't encounter that in Texas. I was in San Francisco and Sacramento. Didn't see any of that there. But again, I'm not disputing what you're saying. I'm just saying I don't know how widespread it is. But I do agree with you that I think that there are people who are being failed by the system. There's no question. And I think that in fact, I was going to ask you, that's one of the things I was going to ask you. And I know we got to get to some other stuff, but I'm curious to know, did you all, what's the deal with tipping over there? Are you tipping over there? And if you are, are you doing the standard, 10 to 20%, or what is that all about?
Tipping over there is the way tipping should be here. Okay. Under a fair system, I don't know how we ever got into this system of tipping. in which we allowed restaurants to pay people less than the paltry minimum wage. But it is absolutely 100% grade A bullshit. Okay. And I resent the hell out of, not the people. Okay. I don't resent the waitresses, the waiters, and I understand what they do is a job, and it's a hard job a lot of time. They deal with a lot of crazy people. I get it. Okay. I know. And I got respect for them and all that. But I resent the hell out of it being my responsibility to pay their wage. Okay.
Yeah.
By tipping them.
I feel you on that.
Listen, you want to charge more for the meal, and charge more for the meal. Charge more for the meal. Pay these people, a decent wage that they can live on. And then if we are inspired by their excellent service, then we give them extra money in a tip, in the form of a tip. And that's what it is over there in London, Paris, throughout Europe. Really that's the way the tipping system is. Those people, and that was what my point. Really, we noticed it, the attitude issues that started with TSA here, security check-in there. That's where we first kind of, everybody was just kind of, it's just, I don't know, it was an helpfulness kind of thing. It was just I'm sorry. Oh, let me, you're having a bad experience. What can I do to make it better? Sort of thing.
Well, if you're talking about TSA, look, I can say, I wasn't thinking about that. I was thinking about restaurants. But if you're talking about TSA, if you're talking about TSA, I did see that. I did see with some people some indifference. I would say nobody was mean or belligerent, but I did see indifference, and I feel for those people because, as we all know, and one guy on my way to, trying to remember if it was Texas or California, I can't remember. But one of the young men, young black fella, he and I started chatting in the course because there was the line, there really wasn't anybody in line but me at that point. And as I was putting my stuff on the conveyor belt, and he was very candid about his concerns about what was going on, how it was going to affect him, whether or not he was going to be paid or not.
Yeah.
I understand with those folks, the TSA folks, they have reason for being grumpy is very, very understandable, or indifferent is very understandable.
Right now, currently it is. But I mean,
I think
they're grumpy on a pretty regular basis, though. I mean, even getting paid or not getting paid, they're pretty grumpy.
Okay,
but I think that the tipping thing, and man, we've gotten. I'm such an old man with this, but we have gotten out of control with tipping. Okay. I mean, when I walk into a place to pick up my to-go order and you say, this is going to ask you some questions. You don't know what the questions are. Come on, you know what the questions are. The questions are, am I going to give you a tip for you handing me the food that I just paid for? I mean, that's what it is. And then if I don't, you look at me like I'm a deadbeat, and it just, the tipping has, everybody is asking for a tip now, and there's a tip on every single a spot for a tip on every single receipt that you get. And it's gone out of this world crazy. It's not supposed to be this way. It's not supposed to be this way. These people are supposed to be earning a living wage, doing the job that you hired them to do. Pay them, charge more for whatever you got to charge more for, and pay those people. It's lunacy what we're doing. But, the whole deal, and you're right. Well, I know we got to get some other actual stuff here, but it just, the trip was great. There's so many things I feel like, go into the differences in attitudes. There was not the kind of concentration on politics, among the people constantly. There was not this division and fighting sort of thing. I felt like people were generally healthier there, at least in appearance. And I think a lot of that has to do with the fact that, they've universal health care there. And I know it's socialism, but they don't concern themselves with going to the doctor like we do. It's not the same system. It's, they take care of minor medical problems early. They have checkups routinely. Little small problems aren't developing into more complicated issues. And let me tell you another thing, man. So we had an Airbnb that we stayed in Paris. And there was a grocery store, right, a little market right across the street from where we stayed. And we had the kids with us. And so we went over to get some little things for breakfast. So we were going to get the kids some breakfast cereals for the breakfast of a couple of days that we were going to be in Paris. And so the breakfast cereal are all the same names, the Fruit Loops, the Frosted Flakes, all that, but they're totally different. I mean, totally different products over there. And I'm like, why are these things different? And the reason they're different is because in France and in much of Europe, they have outlawed certain artificial flavors and colorings, and they've outlawed certain types of sugar and limited the amounts of sugar that can be put in their food products over there.
I knew you were going to say that.
Yeah. So they've outlawed high fructose corn syrup. You can't put that in the cereals for the kids. And all of their soft drinks are made with sugar. One of the few things that I agree with Donald Trump on. I think we should have long ago gotten rid of that high fructose corn syrup bullshit. That I've written stuff about it, and let me tell you, I know what's coming. It's like, because they've got an AI bot somewhere that just listens for the words high fructose corn syrup to be put together in either a newspaper story or on a podcast, and they're going to start sending me letters from their attorneys talking about how I need to take this back. And so, because trust me, I've had them before. This is that because that industry is nuts. But listen, I've looked at it. I've looked at the data. I've looked at what's happened. I think that it suppresses your normal things, your normal, the responses of the body, and it makes you more hungry. I think all of that stuff plays together, and I think it's harmful. But, I think that we've done a poor job of managing some of that stuff. And maybe that makes me sound like Robert Kennedy Jr., but, even a worm-eating brain can be right from time to time.
Yeah, man. Yeah. Well, yeah, no question. High fructose corn syrup needs to be ousted. I'm with you on that. Yeah. You want to get into Charles Barkley?
Sure. Come back, and Charles Barkley's running for governor.
Yeah. Well, is he running? I mean,
I really don't think so. I think, Charles has flirted with this thing before. I wish he would. I think Charles would probably be a pretty decent governor. I think he cares about a lot of people. He cares about a lot of issues. I think he would approach things from a common sense perspective on stuff. I think that he and I would not agree on some things.
Yeah.
And I think that he and I would agree on, I'll say this. I think in the key area of taking care of people and being respectful of others, Charles and I would agree 100%.
Yeah.
And listen, I'll tell you what we'll do. I'll try to get Charles to come on. I know Charles a little bit. We'll try to get Charles to come on the podcast and see what we can do with. We've had some conversations in the past.
Just to set this thing up a little, or to kind of give a context for why we're even bringing this up. So there's this movement that, at least from what I can tell, has just kind of popped in out of nowhere. I mean, I didn't see it coming. Which doesn't mean maybe I've just been asleep or something. But where you got this group of folks that have decided that they want to see him run as an independent. And they, according to the news story I read, they caught him in Leeds one day, I guess, and they presented him with the idea. He was going into some sporting event, some basketball game or whatever it was, and on the way in, he didn't seem that enthused about it, but when he came back out, he seemed like he had thought about it and was more interested in the idea. That's the way the reporting presented it. Of course, my question, Josh, isn't there still a fundamental problem with the fact that he does not live in the state of Alabama?
Apparently not. Because the guy that's going to be running for the Republican nomination sure as hell doesn't live in the state of Alabama.
He claims he does, though. He claims he does.
Well,
Barkley has never, to my knowledge, Barkley doesn't claim to live here.
I thought he had. Doesn't he still have a home in Birmingham?
Well, does he? Okay. See, I don't know. Does he? Okay.
I think he has a couple properties in Alabama, actually.
Okay.
But yeah, I mean, we'd have to talk to Charles and see. But I mean, this is the problem of ignoring laws. We put these laws in place, and when you just ignore them because you're the majority and you think you can do whatever in the hell you want to do, well, then that sets a precedent where other people can also ignore those laws.
Yeah.
And so, and it may come back to bite you in the ass when you do it. And so this may be one of those situations here where, you want to challenge his residency? Well, then let's start talking about residency here. And so I think that may be the case. But, you're right. I read the story and I too was a little bit, surprised, I guess, by the movement for Charles Barkley to challenge. But and look, I don't think he will. I mean, I just think that Charles is living a good life right now.
Yep.
And I think that he is seeing a lot of he's getting a lot of satisfaction out of doing things the way he's doing them. He donates a lot of money to a lot of schools and a lot of causes, and he helps out with a lot of different causes and stuff. And I think that's brought him a lot of joy. And I don't think that he's willing to give that up.
Yeah.
I mean, and also, I'm waiting to see what the new look NBA tonight is gonna look like with now that they've changed from TNT, and I'm hoping it's just going to be the same. Nobody's going to screw around with him and Ernie and Kenny and Shaq, but that is the finest, the absolute finest analyst show in any sport on television today. It is the perfect mix of serious analysis, humor, silliness,
and he's the key reason. He's the key reason.
Absolutely, he is.
I think it would not be that show would not be what it is without Charles Barkley. Period.
Oh, absolutely. You couldn't do it. Could not do it without Charles.
I mean, before he got there, it was just Kenny Smith and my man Ernie, and they were okay. I mean, they weren't bad.
No,
but when Charles got there, man, he took it up to a whole nother level.
Yeah. It's just there. He's self-deprecating enough, and this is the one thing that so many people don't give Charles Barkley credit for, and that's he's smart. Charles is a very smart, quick-witted guy. I mean, that off-the-cuff stuff that he says on there. I mean, that is a sign of somebody with a lot of intelligence. It may not sometimes translate itself into like book smarts or that kind of thing, but he is a very quick-witted, smart guy. I think with a lot of common sense. I like Charles a lot. I like it. I like his style. I like the way he does things. I like the way he thinks. He's a very pragmatic person, and I think he and I kind of connect on that level of thinking.
That show needs and what he brings to it, I mean, just fundamentally is a high basketball IQ. That's what you want in a show like that. And I think he and Kenny Smith in particular have it. Shaq, he's okay. I think he brings something different to the table, but those two bring high basketball IQs and I think that Charles is, as you said, I mean, he's self-deprecating. He doesn't mind being the butt of a joke. There's a lot he brings to that. And he's making a ton of money doing that. It's just hard for me to believe that he really, truly would want to go from making that kind of money and having that kind of fun while working, in the sport that he loves, to doing the mundane work of running a state. It's just hard for me to believe he'd want to do that.
Yeah, I'm the same way. I don't think that he will. But maybe there'll be some other folks who hop in this race who challenge Tuberville. I know Tuberville's going to get a challenge to even being on the ballot, and he's going to have to overcome that. So that's going to open the door up for some folks. If you're a Republican, I would say, I would throw my hat in the ring. Just in case. Just in case, because look, some judges in this state are going to have to look at the laws and tell you that the laws don't matter about residency. Okay.
Yep.
Because Tommy Tuberville is going to be challenged on whether or not he has resided in this state for the last 7 years as the law declares for it to be able to run for governor.
Mm-hmm.
And he can't do it. That's not an opinion. That's not a wishful thinking. I don't know what's going to happen. Okay. I'm not saying that they're going to kick him off the ballot. I'm not saying, maybe they'll finagle some way and figure it out, but I'm telling you that Tommy Tuberville, under the laws that typically govern residency in this state, cannot prove that he has lived in this state for the last 7 years, because he hasn't. And it's not even really a knock on Tommy Tuberville. Okay. I mean, he's lived wherever the hell he wants to live. He's got a very nice beach house down in Florida, in Santa Rosa, and he's lived in that. That's where he lives. Okay. This property up here in Auburn that he claims, he hasn't lived there. He hasn't lived there. It's a football house that he goes to and stays. I don't even know if he stays there when he's there for the weekends. I think it's actually his kids and some of the other folks in the family that and some friends who use that house. But that's all there is to it.
I've read the reporting that you've done and that other people have done, and I think you're right. I think what you're saying, as far as I'm concerned, it's indisputable. Now, again, the question is, what are the courts going to do with a challenge? We see what the Republican Party has done, which is absolutely nothing. So let's see what the courts will do.
Well, I'm going to say this. I'll say this, and this is the end all be all of the whole thing, is they're going to say, show us your tax records. And that's already been done. And Tuberville ran away from that issue. And the reason he ran away from that issue, in my opinion, is that 5 of those 7 years, he didn't file taxes in the state of Alabama. And that, if you are a resident in the state of Alabama, you got to file taxes here. It's that simple. And if you didn't, then you weren't a resident. Either you weren't a resident or you committed tax fraud.
You said something very specific that I'm curious about. And I know I think we've pretty much dealt with the Barkley issue. I hope you can get them to come on the podcast. But dealing with Tuberville now, you said 5 of 7 years. That's a very specific statement, Josh. Why do you think that out of 7 years, there are 5 for sure that he didn't file taxes here in this state? I just
have, in terms of reporting and doing certain things, I've come to believe that he's not, or been told that he has not filed for 5 of 7.
Okay.
So
I guess in order to protect your sources and methods, you said all you could say.
I've said all I can say. I've covered myself. It's my opinion.
Yes.
My opinion.
Yeah. Your informed opinion.
My informed opinion that 5 of 7 years he doesn't have, and we'll see. Listen, I look, if he's got them, and they filed them, then I think that kind of puts the issue to bed. You filed things here. I'd say if you filed taxes in this state, then I think you're good. If you don't.
Let me ask you one other question before we have to get out of here and go to our next segment. If it's really that open and shut, then what is he doing? Why is he going through this whole exercise? If he knows that in the end, he cannot provide the fundamental evidence that would validate his candidacy, why is he doing it?
I think that they are of the belief that there's going to be some protection provided him by, the Republican courts, the Republican judges, and that maybe there's some wiggle room within the laws that he can maneuver his way through. And like I said, I do think at some level, residency and establishing residency can be a subjective sort of practice, because you're judging it based on, typically determine that it's where you lay your head, where the majority of your clothes are, where your possessions are, where you're, and so there are things I think that can be, played with or pushed around. How many, I got clothes at both places. I got furniture at both places. I own both houses, those sorts of things, can be can be said. But I do think that there are also within that framework, there are also some things that are pretty stark and not necessarily movable. And I think the tax issue is one of them. If you hadn't filed taxes here, then, you got there's some problems, so.
How could he possibly get around that?
I don't know.
Or the courts, what
know.
kind of cover could they give him on that?
I don't know. I really don't know. I don't know what those internal conversations are like, and it may be a simple thing of, you know what, we're not going to allow you to access his tax records. There's going to be a fight over that. I know that the attorneys who are working on this challenge, that already have it all planned out, they know they are expecting there to be a fight over the tax records, accessing his tax records.
So you think this is going to be resolved by the Republican primary in May?
This is the other thing. This is here is also timing. Okay, so you certainly can't file it until Tuberville's on a ballot somewhere at the very least. So then you start this process. And so then you start this process and you start pushing and you start denying and you start taking this to this court and this to that court, all these different things, and delaying and delaying and delaying and delaying and delaying. And all of a sudden Tommy Tuberville is governor. And then what are you going to do?
Oh, okay. Well,
so
interesting.
Yeah.
Interesting.
But, I think it's going to be a spectacle no matter what. So, and we'll see how it turns out.
Could be a circus.
Yeah,
could be a circus.
Could be. So, all righty. Let's slide out. We're going to come back with Amy Yurkanin from ProPublica and talk about a very, very disturbing Alabama story. We'll be back in just a minute. It's Alabama Politics This Week, brought to you by Wind Creek Entertainment. Back in a minute. All righty. Welcome in. Alabama Politics This Week. Josh Moon, David Person, and we are happy now to have with us Amy Yurkanin with ProPublica. I believe, Amy, if I'm not mistaken, you did some work with AL.com. You've been around the state here in Alabama for a while, right?
That's right. I joined the staff of AL.com in 2015 and left for ProPublica last year. It's been just about a year, so 9 years at AL.com prior to that. So
nice. Well, first of all, thank you for joining us and coming on.
Yeah, thank you so much for having me. I'm happy to talk about this story. I think it's you are familiar with it, and I think it's an important one to talk about.
Yes, it is. And that's why we had Amy on. Is she's written a story for ProPublica that we'll post the link to when we post up the this segment of the show or this episode of the show. And Jorge Ruiz was a gentleman who I did not know. Didn't know him at all. Did not know anything about his story. I was actually contacted by some folks who worked with a family member of his. And these were people who ran events in Montgomery. And they sent me a letter and just said, hey, I don't know if you do this kind of thing. I don't know if this is in your wheelhouse or not, but I would encourage you to just pull up anything you can on Jorge Ruiz and the case of this car crash that took place in Autauga County. It's in Prattville, the north side of Prattville, actually. And take a look at what happened. And so I did. And I'm imagining that I found exactly what, my response was somewhat similar to your response, which was, there's no way this can be true. There's no way that this can be true. And to just lay a little bit of groundwork here before I let you talk about it. Jorge Ruiz was an immigrant in this country. He was here legally. He had been on a work visa. He was that visa had been extended. He was heading back. He was doing what he was supposed to. He was heading back through Alabama, heading back to go out of the country and renew that visa. And he had a crash. because he fell asleep. That's what I believe. The authorities believe otherwise. And then he was sent. It ended up in the death of, unfortunately, and I mean tragically, a young nurse lost her life because he fell asleep, crossed the center line, and she died. And he was charged with some level of vehicular homicide and was sentenced to 99 years in prison. And so, I mean, it is, I guess when you first saw it, what did you think?
Yeah, I mean, I was pretty shocked, and I should say that I was approached, Jorge, after basically, had been appealing his case. Then he and his family, who have been raising money to pay for private attorneys, basically ran out of money. The Mexican consulate had been aware of this case because they were also pretty shocked by this 99-year sentence. So there are attorneys in Atlanta who basically took up the case on his behalf, the Southern Center for Human Rights, who are pretty prominent for, picking up a lot of criminal justice cases. So they actually came to ProPublica with this case and said, hey, y'all need to take a look at this one. And like you, I was very surprised. This isn't, I think, interestingly, when you talk about criminal justice, this isn't a case of that Jorge didn't do this. Like, we do know that he was responsible for a crash that resulted in the death of Marlena Hayes. So that's not really the question here. But his lawyers have done a lot of work looking at similar cases, really even more egregious cases, people who were really drunk, people who are driving really fast, who are just incredibly reckless behind the wheel, and all of them got much shorter sentences than Jorge. So that really raises the question here of why he got such a long sentence. Initially, it was 99 years, as you mentioned. What exactly was it about his case that made that sentence so long? And his attorneys, the Mexican consulate, after really looking over at this case from start to finish, really came to the conclusion that his status as a Mexican immigrant was really integral to how this case played out from the very beginning to the very end. And you sort of see that, in the story that I wrote and in the coverage that you did as well, how much that factored into the news coverage at the time and other things.
Yeah, it was infuriating to me, the level of complete and utter disregard, and mixed in with some ignorance of the system and how the system works, of people in positions who should know better, and the resistance to corrections from media outlets, even when they were told specifically. And I know this because I told them, I had worked at the Montgomery Advertiser. That wasn't long after I had left. I'd worked there for 15 years. And so I know Marty Roney, who wrote the original stories out of this. I know the folks at the Clinton Advertiser who continue to this day to call him an illegal immigrant in this country. And that's Marty did as well, that he continued to say that he was an illegal immigrant in this. And I talked to them about this and told them this is not true. This is not that his attorney. And we can get into, and I also talked to Richard Lively and some of the things that he did in the case and didn't do. And I have some theories about that, but they told him, listen, this is not true. He's not, but that played, I think, such a role because of what has gone on. It was nowhere close. The environment at that point, the atmosphere in terms of immigration at that point was nowhere close to what it is today. But it was still a hot button issue. It was still something where an illegal immigrant killed somebody, killed this young nurse because he was driving drunk, and none of those facts were true. Look, when you did this, I know we're so hesitant a lot of times to criticize each other in the media, and for right, because we understand it. I mean, there's an understanding of what goes into the job a lot of times, and so we tend to give people the benefit of the doubt. Were you as disappointed as I was in what took place in terms of framing this story?
I mean, I would say Yes. And, I reached out to the Montgomery Advertiser, and they stand by their reporting on this. And, I should make it clear that what happened with his visa is that, as you mentioned, this accident happened days before he was, supposed to, his visa would basically have expired. His exit date was, I think, in early November. So that's when he was supposed to be gone and be back in Mexico. His plan was to do that soon. So he was arrested October 28th. His visa did expire when he was in jail.
Yes.
So ICE did put a detainer on him. And I know that you know all this, but the way that played out is that when he paid his bond, when his family raised the money for him to bond out, ICE put a detainer on him. They, moved him to Montgomery. There was a real rush to get him back into jail in Autauga County. The family never recovered that money, but also there was a sense, and I think the prosecutors believed at the time, that he was trying to get back to Mexico through this sort of backdoor deportation. I've talked to the family. According to them, he was not trying to be deported. He wanted to talk to an immigration attorney about his status when he was out free in Autauga County. But either way, that made a big splash. I think the sentiment at that time was if he had an ICE detainer and he was being deported, that he was an illegal immigrant. And it is true that his visa had expired. But I do feel like it's really splitting hairs.
Yeah.
To call him an illegal immigrant, because obviously he could not leave the country. He was in jail. So that, to me, does not qualify. But I guess if you're being incredibly technical, he was undocumented, behind bars, unable to leave.
Yeah. Well, I think my point was always this, because the framing was she was killed by an illegal immigrant. Well, no, she was not. She was not killed by an illegal immigrant. This crash, an illegal immigrant was not part of this crash. And so, and I'll say this too, just real quick before David jumps in. I also went at this bond person. Because they knew full well when they supplied him the bond, what was going to happen was they were going to move him to another facility and he was going to be rearrested. So, and I talked to the bond lady and she told me flat out, this happens all the time. What are you talking about? And I said, what? I'm sorry, what? This happens all the time. I said, you shouldn't give them their money back? I said, it's a family that scraped and saved to get this back. And you knew full well that he was never out of custody. He was never out of custody. And they paid this bond allegedly to get him out. And then he went directly back into custody of another agency. And so they essentially lost $5,000. And I said, you didn't do anything. You didn't. Well, that's how the system works. And I said, so this happens often? She says, every day. And I said, well, that seems like a story in and of itself. But anyway, I'm sorry. Go ahead, Dave.
Yeah. There's just so much about this story, Amy, that is really disturbing. I want to ask you, from your vantage point, what would you say? It seems to me that the central issue here, the reason for outrage and concern, is the really gross, distorted not distorted, but the really gross level of a lack of parity here when it comes to justice. And along with the gross distortion of the facts of the cases you and Josh have just discussed. Is that what has sort of driven you as you have reported this and written about it?
Yeah, I mean, I think to be charged with murder, as Jorge was, it's a reckless murder is a type of murder, and I dove really deep into this. What is reckless murder in Alabama? And there are several examples. There are examples in court. And basically it is that someone has done something that's just so reckless. It's not even reckless. It's so reckless you basically know somebody's going to die. Firing a gun into a crowd of people, steering a boat into a crowd of swimmers. I think it is really hard to understand how Jorge's actions meet that threshold. And courts in the state have upheld that they did. And I'm still really wrapping my brain around that. So we talk about the sentencing, but the sentence starts with the charge, and the charge here never fit the crime. And I think that becomes clear. There are he faced 3 potential convictions here: the reckless murder, reckless manslaughter, or criminally negligent homicide. And the prosecutor could have chosen not to charge at a certain level. The jury also plays a part here, but that's where you really have maybe the influence of the media coverage, maybe some just of the overlying kind of bias in this case that could have really seeped in. There's research that shows that juries are biased against undocumented immigrants. He wasn't undocumented, but that really shouldn't matter because even undocumented immigrants are entitled to the same due process as everyone in a criminal case. But I think, what it comes down to is this case is a really extreme example, but I think that it's something that happens more often than we want to think about. And I think there are other immigrants in Alabama who may be facing a really hard road when they get arrested and they get charged and they're in court. And I think that it's important to highlight this case because it's not something that we talk about a lot. We're talking a lot about deportation right now, which is extremely important. But there are also immigrants in the criminal justice system. And I think we need to be vigilant that their due process rights are preserved and honored and that they're getting, an equal shake in those hearings. And I think this case really raises a lot of questions about how that's really working in the United States and Alabama, in Autauga County.
Yeah. Well said. So to recap, Amy, we're dealing with a system and with players in the system who are really allowing their own biases about people that are brown and about people who are immigrants when it comes to how justice is meted out. Nobody's saying that Jorge Ruiz wasn't guilty of something. But what we are saying is that the level of justice that has been applied to his situation is grossly unfair. Is that a
I would say so. I mean, I have looked at a lot of the equivalent cases that his attorneys have brought to the attention of the court. And I think that he certainly has been sentenced much more harshly than similar cases, and really not even similar cases. People who did, I don't want to say much worse things, but people who really were more acting just much more recklessly than he was have gotten far less time. People who have killed more people in car crashes, other accidents, I, have seen get, 15 years, 20 years, and yet here we have this man, and he was resentenced to 50 years. And I think it's important to talk about what happened in that hearing as well. But yeah, I mean, why? It just, I don't know what's in anyone's heads. I know that I've spoken to the prosecutor in this case, and he said that race had nothing to do with it, and that this had to do with Jorge, basically not accepting a plea deal, the facts of the case being what they were, that he killed, in other cases, it was passengers who died. In this case, he killed a woman who was not in his car, that all of these were aggravating factors in the case. So yeah, I should make that clear. The prosecutor has said that race played absolutely no role in this.
Well, let me ask you one other question. We've talked about the jury and their role in this, the prosecutor's role in this. What about the judge?
Yeah, I mean, it's such a interesting situation here, right? The initial sentence was handed down by the judge, and it was more than the prosecutor asked for. So, I would say that's huge. I think everyone was shocked by that 99-year sentence, including the prosecutor. So, that was that. But then right after that, you had this strange sort of series of events that happen. And again, it's really hard to sort of understand why, but it almost seemed like the judge really wanted to reconsider this sentence.
Yeah, it seemed like he surprised himself as well. I mean, yeah.
Are you talking
Tom,
about,
if you would, could you go into what happened after and that end of the appeals hearing that you talked about earlier?
Right, and I was going to say you're talking specifically about the reduction of the original from 99 to 50 years. Is that what we're talking about?
Well, I mean, we can go into that, but basically this, right after he was sentenced, actually less than a month later, the judge removed his defense attorney and basically set in motion what looked like a process to just resentence him post-trial, which would have been, I think, a much quicker process than ended up playing out. But because he removed the attorney on the case, it actually ended up not working out that way. And this is all very technical legal stuff, but basically deadlines passed. And so it almost seemed like the judge, wanted to set up a pretty quick resentencing, but wasn't able to do that. So instead, it kind of rolls over to the state appeals court, which upheld the conviction, except for, one justice did dissent, notably saying it wasn't a reckless murder case. But then you end up with this process where the judge is reconsidering this sentence, 5 years later. And it seemed in those hearings that he was receptive to the arguments that the lawyers were making from the Southern Center for Human Rights. And then he was appointed to the Alabama Court of Criminal or Civil Appeals. And when that happened, a new judge was assigned to the case. And this is a judge you also might be familiar with, and that's Sibley Reynolds. He is perhaps most well known for the Lakeith Smith case of felony murder.
Yes.
So, yeah.
He's an idiot. I know you can't say it, but I will. Sibley Reynolds is an idiot. He is one of the more, I've investigated this man for years. He's an old school, small town judge. And there are, I don't know how he's not in jail, but go ahead. I'm sorry.
Yeah. So yes, when Sibley Reynolds got the case, it was after basically the first judge had given a resentencing hearing. So it went to Mr. Reynolds or Judge Reynolds. And when the attorneys got there, they found sort of Judge Reynolds looking through this purple binder full of documents that included statements that Jorge was, an illegal immigrant and things like that he was drunk at the time. And honestly, where we are right now with the case is that his attorneys are challenging all that material as being really prejudicial and something that Judge Reynolds, should not have been considering in this case. Judge Bill Lewis was the original judge. He was appointed to the Court of Criminal Appeals. Then he was also appointed to the Alabama Supreme Court, and he is now an appointee for a federal judge. It did look like Judge Lewis initially was receptive to a lot of the arguments on resentencing. I've read through the transcripts. He was concerned about the information that wasn't presented during Jorge's first sentencing hearing, and he seemed open to really reconsidering this. But his lawyers really feel that when Judge Reynolds got this case handed to him, that really changed, that things just really shifted here. And Reynolds went with the prosecution's request for 50 years, which is still twice as long as any other sentence for a similar crime in this judicial circuit.
About the family, Marlena Hayes' family. I know they were at least my understanding from your reportings, that they were very passionate about what she lost, the life that she could have lived and was unable to live. To what extent do you think that influence the judge and this whole process?
Yeah, so I mean, this is a very sad case. Marlena was just 29 when she died. She was on her way back from an overnight shift at the hospital. By all accounts, she was an extremely dedicated nurse. She rescued dogs. She was extremely close to her family. And I think her family was just gutted, obviously. I don't know what I would do in the same situation. So, their grief is certainly understandable. But I do believe that Marlena's family has played a role in really pushing for the maximum sentence here. And so I think that they have really kept the drumbeat on to keep Jorge in prison as long as possible, and really initially tried to keep that 99-year sentence intact.
Sorry,
you
got a visitor. That's okay. That's
sorry
all right.
About that.
So we all work from home. That's how this works. Yeah. No. There are so many things. Honestly, this would make for a fantastic kind of podcast series because it encompasses so many different aspects of the problems of our criminal justice system, the issues of race, and the issues of a lack of oversight of judges. I mean, Bill Lewis, Judge Lewis, who originally sentenced him to 99 years, who then seemed to be surprised by the fact that he sentenced him to 99 years, and there was a problem here. A couple of weeks later, after some people wrote some stuff about it, he seemed to realize his mistake. Is now up for a federal judgeship. Is awaiting a Senate confirmation on a federal judgeship after being elevated up through the ranks. And not to mention you have the whole spectacle of Sibley Reynolds and his. He just is like out of a movie. I can't explain to you how, having worked in that area and dealt with some of the things that he's done over the course of his tenure there is just mind blowing. But all of it together, and then you had also the issue of Richard Lively and the attorney who got thrown under the bus on this. And I'll say this for Richard. Richard was one of the people who brought this to me as well. And this was after he had been thrown under the bus. So he basically highlighted, what these people were saying about him. And I kind of came to believe Richard's excuse in this, which was, we didn't do certain things because I never thought that it was going to do, that this was even a possibility, that they would ever, charge him like this, that they would ever find him guilty of these things. We didn't even really put on a case because they had not proven anything. And I think, and I don't know if you spoke with him as well, but he told me, through this thing, we had, he said, I knew it was turning when some of the evidence kept getting in. Some of the the speculation of the blood alcohol level, which is really, it's on the level of bite marks almost, at this point. And so, so do you feel like that this was all just an Alabama level soup of awfulness?
Yeah. That's a great way to put it. It's uncanny, really, how much from the very beginning there seems to be a bias against Ruiz. On the day that he is arrested, at the site of the crash, you have an officer basically threatening to take him to jail if he doesn't speak English. The same day, he, has to sign some forms allowing his blood to be drawn and for his Miranda rights. And he is never afforded a professional interpreter during those periods. He's relying on family members. In one case, a 17-year-old senior in high school who's his cousin. And her sole legal experience was working in teen court at the high school. A lovely, lovely young woman, but
yes,
obviously not qualified to coach him through what his rights are as an arrestee in Alabama. So, those very early on are huge issues. And then you see the coverage in the paper that is extremely sort of prejudicial, especially after Jorge was, taken to Montgomery and on that ICE detainer. I just, and then, after the trial, during the resentencing, you just see the issues of his ethnicity, his nationality coming up over and over and over again in this case. And so I do think there isn't one example of bias, but there are just several examples throughout this case that you just kind of return to again and again.
Well, look, Amy, I know we've kept you for an extra long time, and I really appreciate you doing this story. I really appreciate this work. I hope that it draws more attention to this, and that it helps out in writing. What I think is a pretty big wrong here, and I've not spoken to anybody, including apparently the former judge who sentenced him, who doesn't believe that it was a wrong that took place. And I just wish that this thing would have a different outcome. I think he's, at this point, Jorge Ruiz has served enough time for the mistake that he made. But thank you for doing this,
Josh,
and coming on.
Hey, Josh, before we let Amy go, I want to ask both of you a question, because both of you have done a lot of reporting on this. What do you think? You were just talking, Josh, about hoping that this can right a wrong. I mean, do both of you, based on the reporting you've done, really believe that there's an opportunity for Ruiz to get, I'm going to say, some measure of justice, meaning a more fair sentence, and possibly even avoid the problems that now have been stacked on to the unfortunate death of Miss Hayes, because he's now undocumented?
Oh, there is a resentencing effort. There is still an ongoing effort to have this sentence looked at. The purple binder in the resentencing hearing really opened the door to have this kind of looked at again as just prejudicial material. So there's a hearing coming in January, basically on whether Judge Reynolds will continue to preside over this case. So, I think that's a pivotal hearing. And then we'll see where it goes from there. As far as his, future, if he is resentenced, he will serve out his sentence in the Department of Corrections and then return to Mexico. And I can't imagine that he will be lawfully allowed back into the U.S. But I think as far as what he and his family and his lawyers want, they want him to be reunited with his family, with his daughter. He's been someone who has just been a sort of a pillar holding that family together. So I think that would be the outcome that they want, is for him to be back in Mexico, back to supporting his family and being with his daughter.
I don't think that there's much chance of it, honestly. And I think the reasoning for that is certainly not whether or not he deserves it. I think he absolutely deserves it. But I think the unfortunate reality is right now is we're in a climate, especially in this particular state, in which an immigrant is not going to get a fair shake with the people who are in charge of our justice system and the judges that operate within it. And I don't think that and if we did not elect judges, I would think differently. But these judges are going to have to be elected, and you're staring at a bunch of folks who are looking at the spectacle of somebody saying in a primary somewhere, he let an illegal immigrant who killed a young nurse out of jail, and so I have zero faith that we're going to do the right thing. Zero. And make no mistake, this is the right thing. I feel terrible for Marlena Hayes' family. I know some of them, because I lived in the area where she lived for years. And so I know them. I know what, and she was a great person. This is no slight to her, and it's not, you could do both things. You could kind of punish Jorge Ruiz for making what was a very young person's mistake. He went to a concert, he had a few beers, he slept it off, he got up too early, and he drove thinking he would be okay, and he fell asleep. Okay. That's what happened. He fell asleep. He shouldn't have been driving, but he fell asleep in the car. Every bit of data showed that. And there's no data to show that he was drunk at the time. And so I just, the right thing is to let him out. It's not going to happen. I mean, I would be shocked. I will be shocked. I can't believe that we've actually got a hearing to say that we're going to look at Sibley Reynolds, because typically Sibley Reynolds slithers his way out of everything in which he should end up going to jail for or be punished for. So maybe something good will happen and I'll be proven wrong. But I just look at the reality and I think this is where we are.
And I will say his attorneys, and I think all his attorneys, including, Mr. Lively, have really worked hard on this case. Yes. And they have put together quite a strong case for why he deserves a shorter sentence. So, we'll see what happens.
Yeah, I hope it does. But Amy, thank you so much for coming on, for spending some time, for introducing us to your cat.
Sorry, that's Sonny.
Sonny, I like Sonny.
Sonny, yeah.
Sonny's good on camera. I like him a lot. So
he's being very friendly. Anytime the camera's on, he's got to come say hi. So.
Yeah, it's no problem at all. We're just lucky we made it through one segment without my dogs barking.
Great.
Yeah, thank you so much, Amy. We really appreciate it.
Thank you.
All right. Here, Amy. It's Amy Yurkanin, ProPublica. Y'all check her out. We're going to slide out. We'll come back in a minute and wrap this thing up. It's Alabama Politics This Week. Back in a moment. Alrighty, welcome back. Alabama Politics This Week. Our thanks to Amy Yurkanin for coming on and spending some time with us. Man, she was great. Really appreciate her doing that story.
Awesome conversation.
It's a very, like I said, I think it would make a great podcast to explore, just a number of different avenues of things. And it's a terrible situation.
You're saying that, and I think you should really seriously think about trying to do that. I mean, you and Amy working together, because you guys have done so much reporting on it, you should really think about that.
Well, I don't really know anybody who produces or handles podcasts, and so I don't. If I only knew an award-winning producer of a podcast, or or if I just had a competent producer of a podcast who didn't argue with me about bullshit during the breaks, I could.
Josh, I would love to work with you on this project. I mean, seriously, I think you're right, and you guys have done you've done such significant reporting on it. I think it would make an excellent podcast.
Well, listen, man,
it's something we ought to talk about. Seriously,
I would love to talk about it, and I'll tell you this: I have another one that I have long thought would make for I think it would be a #1 podcast in the country type thing.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
For a brief period, a serial type podcast that told a story of something that took place in this general area in the late 90s. And I think that it would be that's got some craziness that went on with it, that it involved a murder, that's a real kind of whodunit thing that's still unsolved to this day. And I think that it could be something that would captivate people. But, listen, I got lots of ideas. They're all floating around.
Well, we should. Seriously, we should have an offline discussion about that.
Absolutely. I'd love to. So, my thanks to Amy. Our thanks to Amy for doing this. Our thanks to the folks at Wind Creek for sponsoring. The folks at SPLC for sponsoring this, and everybody who supports and listens and watches. And comes on and helps us with the reviews and everything else. If you'd like to send us a message at some point, you can do that at apwproducer@gmail.com. So send us anything you'd like, whatever. We try to address all of your questions. We still get some from time to time, but we really do appreciate y'all. All right, moving along to wrap this thing up here. There were a couple of things that we were going to talk about. One of them is one of the shooters in the Montgomery mass shooting that took place a couple weekends ago. has been let out on bond. He is a $60,000 bond, and he was arrested on attempted murder charges. And there has been widespread outrage. The mayor of Montgomery, Stephen Reed, who we've had on numerous times, called it a slap in the face to the victims and the people who experienced it. The governor released a statement essentially agreeing with Stephen Reed and saying that it's got to change, and that now we're going to try to expand Ania's law to cover attempted murder. Which is will be another charge. Basically, what that law does is allow judges to deny bail to people. I got a problem with that. Listen, I get it. I get that we're letting bad people out of jail sometimes, and while they're out of jail, they do more bad things. Okay, I get that. Okay, but I also have this little problem with this phrase. And the phrase is innocent until proven guilty. Okay? And you can't tell me that it's okay to keep someone locked away, which is the punishment for being guilty, until you prove them to be guilty. There's got to be a process in place. If you want to hold someone in jail in punishment and take away their rights and their freedoms and their liberties and all of that we're guaranteed, then you've got to put a process in place to prove that. Okay? And until you do, you can't say, hey, we don't like this process that we've set up by choice that does not allow us to immediately enter into some form of a trial or a system to prove the guilt of this person and to say that he should be locked up. There has to be a process in there that determines that you are a danger to society. Okay? That's got to take place. There's got to be a hearing. There's got to be a process. There's got to be something that goes on. You can't just say it from the bench. Well, we're not going to do it. Yeah, that can't be. That can't be the way we do things.
But look at the trend, and I agree with you 1,000%. Even though I don't dispute the fact that, the likelihood based on the reporting and so forth is that this person is probably guilty of this crime. I don't dispute that, but I think you're 1,000% right. There's got to be a process. And that's the presumption of innocence is key. Protecting that presumption is key to continuing to distinguish us, from autocracies and authoritarian dictatorships. I mean, look at what's been happening off the coast of Venezuela.
Yeah.
Look at what's been happening there, where we've had unilateral decisions made about who's a drug trafficker and who isn't without any due process, without any kind of, judicial oversight or legal oversight. And now we're learning that, well, according to the Venezuelan government, maybe they weren't drug dealers or drug traffickers. Well, how are we to know one way or the other? Because the people have been killed. So I agree with you 1,000%. But I guess what I'm trying to say, Josh, is I think this is the way things are trending in this country. We are losing slowly. We complain about a lot of the extrajudicial things that the Trump administration has been doing and advocating for, and the rhetoric and so forth. Well, this is a byproduct of that, in my opinion. Even the situation with the Jorge Ruiz case. You could argue that there's some of that same problematic kind of thinking that creates that scenario.
Yeah. Yeah, no, you're right. It is. Yeah. Whenever, like I said before, when you start to lose, when you start to violate the laws and flaunt them, and say that that's okay, it sort of becomes okay.
Yeah.
Whenever you have, when you're charged with enforcement or protecting the laws and upholding the Constitution, all of those things, and you don't do it, that kind of then becomes the norm of things. Okay. I mean, when you invade the Capitol and get, that becomes the norm. That you can't do those things. You've got to. There's a reason why we have these laws in place. If you want to increase the bail for attempted murder, okay, I mean, maybe that's something that we should look at. But even that though, I have a bit of a problem with, because and as we've talked, even some other Republicans and prosecutors and folks who have, I think we've talked about on here before, have said, listen, we've got a pretty big problem with this cash bail system, because you're not determining it based on whether or not this person is more likely to commit a crime. You're determining on whether or not that person has the means to get out of jail. Right. And that's all. Yeah. That's all it is. It could have committed the exact same offenses, and in some cases, somebody could have committed a worse one. I give you a perfect example of this. It's the Jorge Ruiz case. Where he was all of this happened to him while this was going on, while I was writing about this. One of the comparisons that I used was the kid who ran into the back of Rod Bramlett and his wife. And Rod Bramlett was the play-by-play guy for Auburn, for Auburn football. Yeah. And this was a very similar case, except for the fact that kid had smoked marijuana, and that's the reason why he had fallen asleep, and it was still in his system. He was, bonded out quickly, got a very good attorney to represent him, ended up with a youthful offender status. I think served a year or so in a facility, a drug rehab facility, and that's it.
Yeah.
So that's the difference.
Yeah. So what you're really saying is that the bail system discriminates against the poor.
Yes. Absolutely.
That's what you're saying.
Well,
that's what you're saying.
Actually, what I'm saying is the entire criminal justice system discriminates against the poor.
Yeah. I mean, we're focusing on bail, but you're right. It's the whole justice system.
Yeah, it's the whole thing, up to and including the filing fees just to get in front of a judge. All of that is discriminatory towards the poor, because we've decided to fund the system based on fees and fines instead of on proper taxation that might base it on income more so than on just the fees and fines that are going to be harder to pay for the poor folks. And so, I mean, I just. All of this is, I think, an issue. I want there to be able to clean up what's problems in Montgomery and in all cities, and I'm certainly not pro crime, and I'm not. I don't have the backs of criminals, but what I do have the backs of innocent people, and that's what's going to happen here. Is there's going to be some innocent folks go to jail and stay in jail for a long period of time, because we have such a screwed up system, and because now, in an effort to punish people who we think are guilty because we've had a bad time in this one case, instead of following the laws and doing things like we should, we're going to do it this way, and it's going to end up punishing some innocent folks, and that's going to be as wrong as anything we've ever done.
And I would also argue, Josh, that it's equal. There's another problem in that you're going to have guilty people who are treated differently. So you got innocent people who are going to be subjected unfairly, unjustly to the penalties of justice, and then you're going to have guilty people who are going to be treated based upon their ability to pay their way out of situations.
Yeah. In both cases, it's a problem. It's a big problem. But all right, let's do our right wing knucklehead. Knucklehead?
Knucklehead works. Let's go with knucklehead.
Yeah, knucklehead. Our right wing knucklehead. Our right wing knucklehead is Thomas Hawley Tuberville. And really, you know what? Maybe I shouldn't say Tommy Tuberville. Maybe I should say his staff, or Laura Loomer's interpretation of his staff, because Laura Loomer, who is an absolute crazy person, tweeted or X'd out this. And I'll just pull it up and read what Loomer has put out on X. And it says, Senator Tuberville and his staff told me. So maybe it was Tuberville that said this to her, that they have encountered a group of Muslims inside the Senate Russell building today, dressed in full Islamic garb, praying on Islamic prayer mats on the third floor of the Russell Senate office building, and bathing their bodies and feet inside the Senate bathroom sinks. This is all happening during the government shutdown. I don't know why that is important at all in any of this, but the Democrats are going to meet with American Muslims for Palestine and AJP Action, both of which are tied to Hamas, which is really not true at all, and the Muslim Brotherhood is also not true. And then she claims that the Islamification of America continues, and that Senator Tuberville is going to join her on Loomer Unleashed tonight to tell the story. That is, I can't believe we're still doing this. I mean, it's not the Islamic thing. Does that not seem like so 2002 kind of deal? You know what I mean? Like,
yeah. And my question is, would she say the same thing if it were the Saudi prince or somebody part of the or somebody from Qatar, who were visiting, if they were visiting, Congress, the Senate, and they wanted to, because Muslims, as I understand it, and I'm no expert on Islam, but I've done a little reading about it. They pray 5 times a day towards the east, towards Mecca. That's what they do. So what if it was somebody from Qatar or Saudi Arabia? Would she have the same position? Would you have a problem with that? Because they'd probably be doing the same thing.
Yeah. Didn't we just welcome the Qataris into
exactly
military into?
And I guarantee you, if they are Sunni Muslims, or even Shia Muslims, they'd be doing the same thing, as I understand it. So what is the distinction here? The distinction here is politics and the fact that they were supposedly Palestinians. That's the distinction. Because I guarantee you she nor Tuberville would be raising a fuss if it were somebody from some of these other areas.
Well, Tuberville's been on this kick here lately of the anti-Sharia law thing that he started. Yeah. I don't. I mean, is that not so out of the blue, out of the left field? Like what?
It is. It is. Did
we just regress politically to like 15 years? I mean, what is going on?
It is out of left field, but again, I'm telling you that they're very selective about this thing. I guarantee you, if because of the financial ties that the Saudis have with the Trump family and the Trump administration, and what the Qataris did with the Trump administration with that plane, I guarantee you, none of this would be coming up if it were about some of them. Yeah. They're very selective about where they want to be outraged about Islam and Sharia law, quote unquote. And nobody has been more of a, we could argue, nobody's been more of a gross practitioner of anti-human rights activities than the Saudis.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah. Yeah.
I mean, but we don't hear anything about that.
No. And if I'm not mistaken, wasn't the funding for 9/11 almost exclusively the Saudis and Qataris?
That's our understanding. Exactly right. Exactly right. And we don't hear anybody saying anything about that right now.
Yeah. Well, it's just the dumbest time to be alive and paying attention. It really is. It really is just the dumbest absolute time to be paying attention to anything and to know stuff. You're better off just not knowing things. You really are. You're better off just watching football and just not knowing stuff. It's just unreal. All right, let's get out of here. Till next week, y'all be safe out there.
Peace.